forward sign or something. In any case, that's what that means. So this is where the patient is going to bend forward, looking. You're looking for a change in the curvature of their spine. So where is the?
Fine.
Yeah.
Oh, I put it over here.
So if they have a scoliosis, which it could either be like lateral to one side or to the other, a person can also have a rotation, which is more like rotational. So that it may not necessarily be like a C curve, but it'll be more like this. The bottom line is no matter if it's a curve this way or a rotation thing that way, it affects the rib cage, right? In that picture that we had in the notes, when the patient bends forward, then the rib cage is going to pop up on one side or the other, depending on whether the curve is levo or dextro. Now, if you've got somebody who's very, very flexible, I usually just tell a person, just bend forward at the hips like you're going to touch your toes. If they end up being like Gumby, and they're like all the way over like this, it doesn't really allow me, come here, come on. You can tell a patient just bend forward like you can touch your toes. Okay, that's good enough. So that way I can see the shelf here. So this is a 90-degree angle, right? So I'm not sure how flexible you are if you go down further. So now I can't really see, right? And so if you had, Joe Gumby, who's bent like this, you can't really see the variance. Okay, so Adam's position, that should be 90 degrees, so they just bend at the hips. But to tell a patient, bend at your hip, but just 90 degrees, it gets confusing. So you tell them to bend forward. And if they happen to be very flexible, then you can just kind of just come back up a little bit, just like that, and then you can observe. Now, quite often when you ask a patient to do range of motion, right, because that's one of the things you want to evaluate in your clinical examination, you want to see what lumbar flexion is like. So quite often I just say, go ahead and bend forward like you can touch your toes, and then go ahead and bend forward, and I can kind of tell what's up. I'm doing Adam's sign without asking them to do it specifically, right? So I just make a mental note. It's either there or it's not there. It is also sometimes when you're specifically looking for scoliosis, which, what's the age group that you'd be looking for? 11 to 16 is typically, the age in which it would present itself, and then 16 and on is where it becomes, what's the right word, like fixed. And so you can palpate in a standing position to see what's up, because when they bend forward, that's going to sometimes that's going to straighten out if it's a functional one, right? In either case, if it is functional, it will kind of straighten out because the effects of the muscles are to, get elongated. And that's going to straighten out the spine, so you're not going to see the context of the scoliosis. And so that's Adam's sign. Spinal percussion, you would use a hammer. So this works pretty good in the thoracic spine, because as you can see, the SPs are pretty available. They're the biggest of anywhere. Well, yeah, really, of anywhere in the spine. The lumbars are kind of big, but but the thoracics are even somewhat bigger in terms of relative. But in any case, it gives you a pretty good landmark. You would bang on it with the hammer. That's going to give you more of a kind of a jarring effect than just straight pressure, right? So it can produce additional information. And also remember that there is that therapy called spondylotherapy, where you would use your thumb on SP and then just kind of bang your thumb, and that kind of stimulates the nerve root. And it also can stimulate the corresponding sympathetic nerve root ganglia that's paravertebral, right? So that's another way to kind of look at spinal percussion. So rib compression. So with rib compression, it doesn't really matter if you start out lateral or A to P, but you're going to do both, right? So if he has a problem that is lateral, let's say he coughed and broke a rib, and the rib break is usually not like, where it comes through the skin, unless it's really like traumatic. But you can break a rib coughing. You can throw a disc coughing or sneezing. So if it's out here, if I press on it, it's going to hurt directly, right? But if the person has costochondritis or some kind of a misalignment or a fixation, which is posterior or anterior, right? When I'm compressing the rib cage, is that not going to make it hurt here and here as well? So you kind of double up your information. So I would start up kind of in the axilla, press in, go low, so that, either 3 or 4 compressions, and I'm pretty much going to get the entire rib cage, right? And then whether they hold their arms out or not is not necessarily, critical. And to do A to P, because I am right hand dominant, I tend to put my right hand on the sternum, and my left hand on the back. And so my left hand is more positioned like this. So the thoracic area ends up in the hypothenar eminence area. My front hand I'm using more like this. And the reason, and I'll show you, and I'll turn him around so you can see, but back here, when I make my correction, I'm avoiding the breasts. This is more significant than a female, and I'll demonstrate on Shah so you can see that. Because you don't want to do this for obvious reasons. Around. You don't want to do this. Right? So.
I couldn't see.
So how's it supposed? That's interesting. We need to do it more than once.
And what was that?
Before we
Yeah,
just
you
did
put
it once.
roll them around.
Yeah.
Like this way. Rather than
Yeah.
it just helps it. And then again, if he has an A to P problem, it's going to hurt because I'm right on it, right? But also it's going to, because it's going to affect the rib cage because it's kind of an oblong circle, so to speak. It can hurt out here as well, so that gives you information. You just have to kind of tell. Is it hurting because I'm directly on the lesion? Take that into consideration. And then it should also have a representative response when you're not directly on the lesion with pressure, but you're affecting it, by that compression, because this kind of compression makes it go that way, and this kind of compression makes it go that way, right? So you get that apex of the circle, so to speak, is going to be responsive, so you can get that information. You can also, as I mentioned, sometimes measure the chest expansion with the tape to see, because when a person has a rib problem, they can't breathe very well. And so if you want to see what is your progression towards improvement, that you've gained, X centimeters in your ability to expand your chest. Because when it hurts to do it, you're kind of... So some people, when they have, broken rib or costochondritis, they just don't breathe very much, right? Because it hurts to breathe. And then that can make them tired because there's not as much oxygenation and, so on and so forth. There's a lot of other, parameters going around. And so just so I can demonstrate on Shah in terms of rib cage compression, just walked in at the right time. So again, so I would come in like karate chop, right? And that way you can avoid the breasts. And I'm using my right hand because it's my dominant hand because I figure it's more important for me to have control in the anterior aspect than the posterior aspect. And then, obviously, lateral compression is not as critical because you're not really next to or close necessarily to the breast tissue. So that's some of the thoracic spine ortho tests. Then we also had Lermite sign. So Lermite sign is where the person is sitting on the table, right? I'm just kind of, this is not how they would do it, but she's sitting there. And then you bend the person forward, right? So this is making the entire spine stretch, right? And Lermite was more interested in cervical spine stuff, actually. And so when you do that and you're stretching that cervical spine, they're going to get radiating pain patterns. And then Linder's sign is where the patient is laying down supine, right? And you just lift their head up. Now that's going to affect their lumbar spine because Dr. Linder was in the lumbar spine, but obviously you can also affect the thoracic spine. So it's kind of an indirect, thoracic nerve root, issue. And then specifically the first thoracic nerve root stretch is to put your hand behind your head so your fingers are on your neck. And then you put your elbow kind of back like that, and that will stretch that first nerve root. Okay. And the last one that's listed here is Valsalva, and as I mentioned, it's valuable to give the patient a specific set of instructions because you all guys know. And the midterm is like, oh yeah, just bear down. And the partner was like, because most of them knew what they were supposed to do. Because I told them, demonstrate the Valsalva. Yeah, but your patient doesn't know what it is. So if you just say bear down like you're on the toilet, what kind of an image are they going to get? So, take a nice deep breath, hold it, and bear down. And I do it, they see me do it, they're like, know what to do, and then they do it, and then you don't have to conjure up images that perhaps you would prefer, that they would prefer to not have conjured. Like that. So, there were some people in the exam, they just said bear down, just take a deep breath, bear down, and like that. So it's helpful if you just do that. Take a nice deep breath, hold it, and bear down, and you do it, they see you do it, and like I said, it's a parrot thing, or it's, monkey see, monkey do, and they're able to accomplish that. And quite often, even in the, when I'm taking a history with the patient, and they're sitting in the chair, even before I actually, frankly, do an exam, if they have like back pain or some kind of radiation thing that I'm considering, it might be, disc related. I might ask them to do Valsalva just sitting in the chair, and then I'm like, oh, okay, this is positive. There may be some disc stuff going on, or it's not. If it's local, Remember, when you do Valsalva and you bear down, what are you doing with your muscles? You're tightening them. So what happens if you have a muscle strain? It's going to hurt. But is it going to radiate? No. The thing that you're looking for with Valsalva is a radiating pain pattern, which indicates nerve root, or myelopathy, which is actually spinal cord damage. So that's how you can use the Valsalva in that context. So those are some of the